Hello there, fillies and gentle colts. I am Stormblossom here, bringing you another reading, and today's is going to be 2 in the Morning by Peaberry. It falls into the categories of alternate universe, human, slice of life. And like always, I will be joined at the end for the commentary with Glimmer Zephyr. The chapter is going to be 2 a.m. Without any further ado, let's begin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to It Ain't Nothing But Mammals, the beastliest game show out there. The voice of the announcer tore me from my sleep, causing me to awake with a soft jolt, before slowly opening an eye and looking at the flickering TV screen in front of me. I sat there a moment and then let out a long, tired sigh, closing my eyes again and raising my right hand over the sofa pillow next to me, blindly searching for the TV remote. After a few awful, drawn-out seconds, my hand finally got a hold of the black piece of plastic, and the TV screen died without comment. With another sigh, I forced my eyes open once again, the desire to just lean back and spend the rest of the night on my sofa seemingly to grow stronger with every second. However, remembering how terrible I felt the last time I spent the night on there, I gave myself a mental kick, and noticing only now that my left hand was still buried underneath a warm, rising and sinking pile of soft, light blue fur. I carefully wiggled my hand free, relishing the velvety sensation around my fingers. When I was young, I always thought that kittens or puppies had the softest belly fur. That is, until I met her. "Hey," I whispered as I slowly pulled my hand out from underneath her belly and led it up to her head, which was still resting on my thigh, gently caressing her cheek. "Come on, it's time to go to bed." She scrunched up her face, replying with a weak groan and rolling over so that her face was pointing away from me. "Come on," I repeated myself, moving my hand from her cheek to her forehead, where I softly ran it through her white and blue mane. "We can't sleep on the sofa again." She replied nothing, instead pretending to have fallen asleep again. I looked at her, then rolled my eyes. "Oh well, if you want it that way." Without another word, I shoved her head off my thighs and scooted forward on my couch, letting out a long groan as I arose to my tired feet. She mumbled as I got up, one of her hooves blindly reaching out and tapping on the sofa cushion in a vain attempt to get me to stay where I was. I reached for the light switch and turned on the big ceiling light in my living room, gaining a groan of disappointment from her as she pinched her eyes closed. "Come on now," I said once again, as I turned back to look at her lying curled up like a cat on my couch, hooves covering her eyes. "You cannot avoid the inevitable." Once again she remained completely silent, the only indication that she was still conscious being her chest that was slowly rising and falling. "Hey, Colgate," I said with a little more power, leaning towards her. She didn't react. "Collie," I continued, leaning even closer to her. I brought myself face to face with the blue unicorn as a broad grin appeared on my face as I sweetly cooed, "Minuet." A single bloodshot, pinprick blue eye shot open, staring at me with the fury of 1,000 suns. "Yeah?" she replied curtly. Grinning, I pulled my head back, glad to see I still know how to push her buttons. "Come on, it's time to hit the pillows. We fell asleep on the sofa again." "Yeah," she muttered tiredly. The single eye closed again, and she seemed to shake her head, rolling over and turning away from me. "It's just 2 minutes of getting up, walking to our bedroom, and lying down," I explained to her in an equally tired voice. "I'm sure you can survive that." She seemed to reflect, saying nothing for the moment before softly shaking her head again, giving me another half yawn. Nah. I sighed, reflecting as I looked down at my friend. It took me a few moments to come to the conclusion that just standing there and watching her drift back to sleep will only help one of us get a comfy night rest and leave the other tired and red-eyed in the morning. I so curtly decided to skip the thinking part and just act. Leaning forward, I carefully shoved my hand underneath her body and slowly picked her up. I guess as I lifted her off the sofa, "You know, you've gained quite some weight recently. Maybe we should cut back on the donuts." The mayor in my arms sighed softly, then whispered, "You know what they say about living in a glass house," before wiggling herself comfortable in my arms and going limp like a sack of potatoes. "Well," I replied, grinning, as I led my hand to her belly, "I may not be a supermodel, but I am not sure if you can do this with my belly." Confirmingly, I ran my hand through the light pus that had grown in her mid-region throughout the last couple of weeks, holding back a pleasant shudder at the incredibly soft sensation and giggling, "See? Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle!" The muffled growl I received in return was barely audible, but to suffice to inform me that I was indeed stepping on some very thin ice right now. "Hey, I'm just kidding," quickly talking myself out of the danger zone and gently tickling her soft belly fur. "You're still the cutest little mare I've ever seen." That seemed to pacify her enough to relax again and slump back into my arms with the thinnest of smiles on her face, causing me to look down and smile right back. "You sure you don't want to walk?" I asked her, yawning as my body once again reminded me how tired I really was. I received no reply. The muffled sound of her soft breathing seemed to indicate that she had fallen asleep again, or just wanted me to think that she was sleeping. However, not wanting to start an argument at this time of the day, I sighed and put my hands back under her body before slowly turning around and walking out of the living room. Cradling Colgate in my arms, I slowly passed through my hallway and headed for the door leading to our shared bedroom, closing my eyes in pleasant anticipation. I could already see myself slumping onto my comfortable mattress, feeling the soft touch of my pillow against my head and letting out a happy sigh as I stepped through the door. And, "What do you think you're doing?" The sharp question came from somewhere below me. I looked down and found a perfectly awake, fully conscious, and very reproachful pony sitting in my arms and looking up at me like a mother that had just caught her kid trying to steal from the cookie jar. "I am going to bed," I informed her curtly, and looking back up again, my thoughts drifted back to my oh-so-comfortable and tempting mattress. "Without brushing your teeth?" The question sounded outraged, as though I just announced a mass shooting or a nuclear war. I forced my eyes closed, drawing in a sharp breath. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered through clenched teeth. "I thought I told you about how important dental hygiene is, didn't I?" Colgate said, still with the voice of an admonishing mother. "So you should know better than to go to sleep without brushing your teeth." "I am tired," I clarified soberly. "So am I," she assured me. "But your caries isn't, and neither is your periodontist. And I've never seen a form of cavities that cares about whether you're tired or not." She tapped a hoof against my chest. "Come on now, it's time to do brushy brushy." I sighed deeply, regretting that I got up from my sofa in the first place. "Come on," the blue pony repeated herself, punching her hoof into my chest. "The longer you wait now, the longer it's going to take you." Letting my shoulders shrink and casting a wistful look in the direction of my bed, I slowly, reluctantly turned around again and walked over to my bathroom, gaining a cheerful, "That's the spirit," from the pony in my arms. Moments later, I stepped through the bathroom door, not even bothering to turn on the ceiling light, and stepped in front of my sink, crouching down to set Colgate down. "Hey, what are you doing?" She squealed in surprise as I lowered her to the ground. "I'm brushing my teeth," I replied dryly, "like you told me to." "But you don't have to put me down," she whined, and I stopped in my movement, leaving her hovering a little more than a foot off the ground. I gave another tired sigh, then said, "And how am I supposed to brush my teeth with a full-grown, and if I might say, slightly pudgy mare in my arms?" She looked up, scowling at me for a second before saying, "Hey, look." Her horn lit up, grabbing mine and her toothbrush from the sink and applying a pinch of toothpaste to it before leading them to mine and her mouth, respectively. "See?" she said with a toothbrush in her mouth. "It's easy." Slightly amused, I rolled my eyes and rose again, taking Colgate with me, and her magic carefully worked the toothbrush in my mouth. 5 minutes later, both of us were done, and thanks to the magical help of my friend, I didn't have to move a muscle, as her magic put my toothbrush back in its place, and she rinsed out her mouth. "You know," I said as I walked out of the bathroom with Colgate in my arms, unable to deny that I enjoyed the minty fresh sensation in my mouth, "why don't you do this every night? It seems a lot easier to me." "Because you're not supposed to be lazy, silly," she replied with a light giggle in her voice. "I made an exception today because you were tired, but tomorrow you'll have to do it yourself again." "Fine," I muttered tiredly as I entered my bedroom, the thought of finally being able to sleep causing me to yawn again. "But for now, let's just sleep." As I received no reply, I looked down at me. It seems Colgate was way ahead of me once again, as she had already made herself comfortable in my arms and closed her eyes. Well then, as I stopped in front of her bed, which consisted of a set of pillows and a blanket at the foot end of my bed, and carefully lowered the sleeping mare onto it. Sweet dreams. Stretching my tired arms, I got back to my feet and walked over to my bed, a pleasant shudder running through my body as I finally snuggled myself between my very comfortable mattress and my extraordinary soft blanket, and rested my head on my incredibly snuggly pillow. I closed my eyes and felt myself drifting off to sleep within seconds. That is, until I felt hooves walking on my bed and slowly coming closer. Laboriously opening my eyes, I looked up and saw nothing. My bedroom was pitch black, save for a thin beam of moonlight shining through my window. However, I felt something touch my side shortly after. A warm bundle of soft fur shoved itself underneath my blankets right next to me, and let out a slightly irritated huff. "What are you thinking, claiming this huge bed all to yourself while I have to sleep on the ground? I am not a dog, you know." The reproachful question came after a few seconds. I sighed softly, contemplating to pretend I had already fallen asleep, but then turned around to face the blue unicorn and said, "Right, a dog wouldn't complain nearly as much." I can see her pout in the dim light and put a hand on her cheek. "Hey, I'm just kidding. I'm always happy to share," I assured her with a smile that seemed enough to cheer her up again, as she smiled back at me and replied with a soft thanks. After a moment of unpleasant hesitation, she added, "I'm not fat, am I?" she asked, sounding genuinely concerned. I said nothing, just looking at her for a few moments, which caused her to become even more insecure. However, before she could say anything, I gave her a warm smile and said, "Of course not. Of course not. There is virtually nothing wrong with a little pudge, and it definitely doesn't make you fat." She didn't seem to believe me at first, just looking at me with a cocked eyebrow. So I added, and you can trust me. If I were a magical talking pony, I'd totally chase after you, I said with a cheeky wink. A light blush appeared on her face, but she smiled, looking to the side, and said, Thank you. I appreciate it. No problem, I replied, my smirk slowly turning into a thin smile. Maybe we should still cut back on the donuts, though. We'll see about that. Colgate put me off with a weak grin before turning over and muttering good night. I looked at the backside of her head, frowning. You know, I was being serious. These things ain't good for your health and not necessarily cheap either. A loud resounding snore was all I got as a reply. And the sugar is bad for your teeth too, you know, I added for myself, but remaining silent, deciding to grant her the little triumph and instead closing my eyes too, finally relieved to finally be able to sleep. I ran my hand through her back fur, feeling the warmth of her body against my palm, the touch of her soft breathing against my fingers, and slowly drifted off into dreamland. Truly, life was good. Author's note. I was feeling down and wrote this to cheer me up. Hope it had the same effect on you. Alright, first up, before we get to the commentary, I'd like to apologize for the fact that this is late. We've been having a bit of technical issues, and I'd also like to apologize for the fact I could not pronounce some of these words very well. Now, on to the commentary. Glimmer, do you have anything you'd like to add first?
Yes, Colgate is definitely one subtle, vengeful pony.
Would have to agree.
I mean, you wake her up, call her minuet. What she do? She stands there and makes you brushes your teeth by force for a good 5 minutes when you only need 2.
Yes.
Guess she was getting up in there.
Want to make sure it's done and done right.
Apparently.
But there's also one thing I would like to add.
Okay.
This story made me want a good dozen donuts, a glass of milk, and a good nap.
Agreed. This is definitely one of the lighter-hearted stories that we've done.
I would have to agree.
Not necessarily the funniest, but the more lighthearted.
Definitely adorable.
Yes. So, anything else you want to bring up there, Storm?
Not really. Other than the fact that ponies have incredibly soft belly fur.
Well, at least Colgate.
Good point.
Won't know about the others until, well, some pony writes it.
Exactly. Alright there, fillies and gentle colts. I believe this is it for the commentary. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to leave a like, and if you want to hear more, please subscribe. This is Storm Blossom, with a friendly reminder to stay random.
This is Glimmer Zephyr, signing out.